Good evening and welcome to episode number 5 of the Frontline Forum. I'm Guy McCardle from SOFREP.com. My co-host tonight is Aaron Rad Radel. I got that right this week, correct, Rad?
That's right. Thanks, Guy. That's exactly right.
Of the internationally renowned SOFREP podcast. Tonight, our special guest will be former Navy SEAL, Delta Force Command Surgeon, and author Dr. Robert Adams. But before we get to Dr. Bob, can we call you Dr. Bob, by the way? I feel kind of...
That's my favorite. Yes, please.
All right, Dr. Bob. I'd like to introduce the latest and greatest offering from SOFREP Media, the SOFREP Book Club. Y'all going to want to look at this, most certainly. We've partnered with one of the biggest publishers in New York to curate an ebook library with over 1,000 books, well over 1,000 titles now. And as a member, you'll have unlimited access to the SOFREP Book Club. Dr. Bob's books will be there, the 3 of them that he has written, and we will talk about those extensively here over the next hour. To sign up, now listen carefully because we're supposed to have a graphic on this and I don't see one at this point.
Let me draw one up.
It's very simple. Go to sofrep.com/book-club. That's sofrep.com/, the word book, and then a hyphen and the club. It's where you can sign up, and early founding members will get 70% off the annual price. So right now, if you go to that link, you can sign up today for $35.99 for an entire year. And that will get you access to over 1,000 books. You'll get sneak peeks to Brandon Webb's upcoming bestsellers. I know he has a couple books coming up, books in the works, ones he's currently writing, as well as monthly recommendations from the authors and editors here at SOFREP. So check it out, sofrep.com/book-club. Snag that 70% discount. You'll be glad you did. Okay, thank you very much. Tonight, we have the author of 3 books, former Navy SEAL and Delta Force Command Surgeon, most definitely an underachiever, Dr. Bob Adams. Welcome, Dr. Bob. Thank you for being here.
You bet, sir. Thank you.
And welcome back to SOFREP, Dr. Bob. Glad to have you on board again. It's good to have you. Some of you, our listeners may remember our past episodes that we talked about and getting in depth with you. And, last time we spoke, you were going down to help a friend. Did that go well?
So it did and it did not. That was a trip to Mexico with 2 of my classmates from BUDS training to go help out another BUDS training classmate that we took to Mexico for a month to help with traumatic brain injury. And we saw some remarkable improvements while he was there. But unfortunately, as many of these novel treatments go, the improvement didn't last. And he's currently in a care facility to help with people with traumatic brain injury. Doing well. I mean, health-wise, he's doing okay. And we get to visit, but we didn't see the magic we had hoped for.
Yeah. Okay. Well, positive thoughts are for you and your friend.
Thank you.
Yes.
Dr. Bob, we were talking offline extensively before, and you have quite a rich family history of distinguished military service, to say the least. And I understand that as a teenager, you really didn't have any desire at all to join the military. Apparently, you were moving every 3 years and just wasn't the thing for you, let alone the SEAL teams. But what made you change your mind and dive in, excuse the pun?
I get asked that question a lot. People assume, since I come from 5 generations of career military, that I just went and followed in the family's footsteps. But the reality was, I wanted nothing to do with the military when I was in junior high school and high school. Tired of moving every 3 years of my life, and I was sitting in my bed one afternoon in the back porch, back room. And I was reading the Reader's Digest, and I hit this article called Super Commandos of the Wetlands. Now, this is 1967. And the SEAL teams had been formed in 62, but had kept completely secret for those 5 years since Kennedy formed them. And I read this article, and I went, oh, my God, there's people out there that jump out of airplanes, go scuba diving, run and stay in shape for a living and get paid extra to do it. I'm going to do that. And literally, boom, right there on the spot, I said, I think I found a path for me to go. And then I thought about it and I went, well, I'm going to be a Navy SEAL. I guess I'm going to have to be in the Navy. So check that box. And if I'm going to be in the Navy, well, maybe I ought to go to the Naval Academy like my dad and granddad did. So I walked out on the porch and said, hey, Dad, I'm going to be a Navy SEAL. How do I get into the Naval Academy? I'm junior in high school. I thought he was going to wet his pants. And, he didn't know what a SEAL was. Nobody did back then. But he goes, well, son, let me help you. And a year and a half later, I swore into the Naval Academy at just shy of my 18th birthday and started my trip down the Navy SEAL pathway. And before you ask me this question, if you, I didn't get my choice at the Naval Academy to go into the SEAL teams. I had to go out on a destroyer for a year and a half first because I didn't finish high enough in my class to make that a choice at service selection night. One of my classmates, by the way, was Admiral Eric Olson, who was our first 4-star Navy SEAL. And he got one of the 3 slots that were available to the 900 of us. I was down there middle of the class. I never had a chance. But and when I went to the Naval Academy, they said, what are you here for? I said, well, I'm going to be a SEAL. They went, no, you're not. There are no flag officers. SEAL teams, we train flag officers. And back then, the best you could hope for in any of the special operations communities was 05 or 06 maybe. Well, I don't care. It's just what I want to do because they're going to pay me to jump out of airplanes and go scuba diving. So nobody listened to me, and I didn't. I got paid no attention to, and I actually made it all the way to graduation, feeling like I'd failed in my plan. But I elected to take a 30-day free leave period and go down with 12 of my Naval Academy classmates to Key West, Florida, and go through the underwater swimmer school so I could get a little 3rd-class diver's pin and, get scuba dive certified. Well, while I was there, one of my SEAL instructors pulled me aside, and he was a SEAL teaching diving. He goes, hey, sir, you are really having too much fun here. We're trying to hurt you and you're having a ball. Have you ever thought about being a SEAL? I went, funny you should mention that.
Yeah.
And with his encouragement, I kept my eyes on on that ball. And a year later, a very famous Navy SEAL by the name of Scotty Lyons, who was the leader of the Barefoot Patrol in Vietnam, a legendary patrol, came recruiting through where my ship was stationed. And I got the message that they were doing tryouts, physical tests. I jumped off the boat, literally ran there,
Shoes off,
did my tryout, and got accepted. So thus began a childhood ambition.
That's a great story. We have a picture here of you at, I believe, Annapolis. I don't know if you have that behind the scenes computer tech guy.
There we go. Yep, that's graduation day.
Well, look at you there, huh?
Yeah, I love dress whites.
Wow, look at that.
My roommate, who became a Marine aviator and retired as a colonel in the Marine Corps. And, I made it all the way up to commander in the Navy before switching services, becoming a 2nd lieutenant in the Army and starting all over again. But after some 30 years in uniform, I made it back to colonel. and so now I can sit at the table with this nice man here.
So when you were
happy there,
what was your rank? So your rank transferred from what in the Navy to the Army? Did you get even rank for that?
Commander, 05 in the Navy, SEAL team executive officer, to 2nd lieutenant, Joe Shit the Rag Man in the Army.
Yeah. Well,
getting a little
don't
bit
hate the player,
ourselves.
hate the game.
Yeah.
So you're a SEAL and you're done with the teams, and for a lot of people that would be like enough, but no, at age 36, and this blows my mind because I couldn't do this at 22 because I could have been accepted. At age 36, after 12 years in the teams, you change your mind from a combat focus to a curing focus and decide, I'm going to go to medical school and be a doctor. What led you to that decision?
So that was a really interesting time. If you think back to the 70s, it was post-Vietnam. All my instructors were Vietnam veterans. One of them, a very famous Medal of Honor winner, Mike Thornton. And they put us through a very tough winter SEAL class. And I loved it. I had a ball. And all of the 11 out of 70 of us that made it through that winter class, are still friends today, made a very, very wonderful environment to be in the SEAL teams at that time. But money kept getting less and less and less, and training opportunities were harder and harder. And there weren't any wars. There was just nothing to shoot at. And so I decided, you know what, there must be more challenges out there. So I decided to transfer to the reserve SEAL teams and try my hand at something else. I was going to go back to school, which I did, and I got a master's in business. But I love telling this story that I got out, transferred. I'd made 03 lieutenant by then, and had such great jobs. I was the assistant parachute team officer doing free fall parachute demonstrations around the world. I had a platoon of SEALs that I deployed to Korea and the Philippines with, and we just, had the time of our lives as a young man. But it was getting where I couldn't buy bullets, and their parachutes were old, and our demolition was dangerous. And all right, I'll go try something else. And the funny part is, I actually started on a business to develop some patents, which we eventually did do. But I discovered as soon as I got out of the military that the civilian world doesn't give you 30 days of paid vacation, and they don't pay for your medical care. And
Right.
oh my goodness, it's expensive to live out here. And within 6 months, I pick up the phone, I call the Navy, I go, okay, sorry, bad choice on my part. Let me back in, because it sucks out here. And they said, well, Lieutenant, we really appreciate you calling us back, but there's no wars and we're still drawing down our military. And right now we don't have any room to bring more SEALs back in. So hang out there in the reserves and we'll call you if there's a war. And I went, well, damn. So this is a long way to answer your question. Now I had to sit around and go, well, the SEALs won't let me in. I get to play on my weekends and 2 weeks of active duty and do all the fun stuff anyway. But what do I want to do for a living that can be as much fun as being a Navy SEAL platoon commander? And with much thought and help from my wife, thinking through these issues, I stumbled on the memory that I loved my biology class in the Naval Academy. It was the only A+ I got in school, and I started thinking, well, who does biology? Well, I think doctors do biology. And it led me down that pathway. I came home one day and said, sweetie, I know you're pregnant with our second child here, but I want to go to medical school. And that means we're going to be poor and in poverty level for the next 7 years. And she, in her brilliant wisdom, looked at me and clearly said, look, we were poor and happy when we got married. We can be poor and happy again. Go do something that makes you happy, because I need you to come home and love our children. And wisdom of that, chokes me up to this day. And so I spent 2.5 more years trying to get all my prerequisites redone and to go back to school, working full-time as an MBA and part-time as a SEAL, and finally got into Wake Forest University, just recently promoted to commander, swore in. The only picture I have in my commander's uniform, which is in this book about Navy SEAL training, was when I got sworn into the Army as a second lieutenant. And the Rear Admiral, who was a doctor, swore me into the Army scholarship program. And he goes, Bob, I always congratulate people when we bring them into these military scholarship programs, but I just turned a Navy SEAL commander into an Army second lieutenant, and I can't bring myself to congratulate you. And I've always thought back on that as one of the more enjoyable moments. But that's what did it. I just wanted to find a job that could make me feel good about what I do. And before you ask me this question, it was a brilliant decision. I've loved every single years of the next 30 years of practicing medicine.
That's a wonderful story, and you have a great wife there. I mean, say very, very supportive, obviously, because I'm sure you were kind of busy during medical school, and even with 2 little ones around. That, yes. Oh, a question here about your grandfather. We were talking a little bit earlier, was a graduate of Annapolis as well, and later a superintendent of the Naval Academy from the class of 26, right? So like I said, a very rich and storied history. What would you like to share about him?
So I got 2 favorite stories. I'll tell you a short, funny one first, because we were talking about the Naval Academy. I was not a great plebe. I got lots and lots of demerits. And when I was complaining about what a bad plebe I was, my grandfather pulled me aside and let me tell you a story. And he said, people that go to the academies and don't get any demerit, that's him. There you go. Retired as a vice admiral, chief of naval personnel, and who signed all the orders of my seniors who went to the Naval Academy before me. He was a conduct case when he was in the Naval Academy. 1926 was after the war to end all wars, and there wasn't supposed to be more wars, so they were all having a good time. And he's, I've read his biography, and he said, I had a ball at the Naval Academy, and Nimitz and Bull Halsey and all the people that were his friends were all testing the limits of the rules at the Naval Academy when he would tell this story. He goes, let me give you an example. He says, when I was a senior at the Naval Academy, I was frozen one demerit from being kicked out. And that's my granddad talking about his experience. And I went over the wall again anyway with my girlfriend, future wife, to take her to a dance at the Army Navy Country Club. Because this man here, as I'll tell you later, is the son of a brigadier general in the Army, West Pointer, and they lived in Bethesda, and they were members of the country club, and he took his date there. And he went there with another first class from his class, who would later have a destroyer class named after him, Admiral Kirkpatrick. And the two of them took their dates there, and unfortunately, there was a professor from the academy at this particular dance who saw them there in their midshipman uniforms, and came up to him and said, gentlemen, are you out here on some sort of special liberty plan or extracurricular activity? And they went, no. Okay, well, just thought I'd ask. And, making this long story short, he next morning, will Midshipman Smedberg, which is my mother's maiden name, and Kirkpatrick, please report to the superintendent's office. So chop, 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 they go, and they're left waiting out in the waiting room for 30 minutes. They know they're in trouble. Finally, the superintendent brings them in, and they're standing at attention, reporting, and the superintendent puts his papers down and looks at them, and he goes, gentlemen, it came to my attention this morning that there were two midshipmen at the Army Navy Country Club last night without authorization. Long pause. And I hope to hell I never find out who those two men were. Dismissed. Which his leadership is his best, because both of them would have been kicked out in their senior year had he given them one more demerit. The reason I love telling that story, my granddad does too, fast forward to him being the superintendent. Same exact thing happens. Two guys get caught in their senior year with enough demerits to get them kicked out. He brought them in, sat them down, made them wait, did the same thing. Gentlemen, hope I never find out who those two men were. Oh. And when they left, he looks up and he goes, we're even now, God, right? Yeah. That's how you like to tell the story. So now, that's the midshipman, later to be 3-star admiral. And in answer to your question of what's one of my favorite stories, he tells me that as soon as the World War II broke out in 1941, all the Naval Academy officers still on active duty were getting promoted and sewing on stripes faster than they could buy uniforms, because they brought in all the reserve officers and they took the regular line guys and they put them in charge. Same thing happened to him. Next thing you know, he's in command of 2 different destroyers in the early part of the war, when we were losing to the Japanese and bad stuff was happening in the surface warfare. And he found himself on the USS Lansdowne, his second command. And the 2 stories that I love, he earned his first Silver Star of 2 during the Solomon Islands campaign, when, again, we're losing, but we had an island there that he pulls up to the pier to reload ammunition and fuel. He's been escort for aircraft carriers all this time. And the rules in the Navy then and still now is when you're taking on fuel and ammunition, you shut down your boilers because they're fire-powered 4 boilers. He said, no, there's submarine activity in the area. Pulled everybody aside, guys, we stay on general quarters while we're fueling. We get attacked while we're here. Boats made on the bow, you drop the anchor over the side. Guys on the side, you cut all the lines. I'll come back and get you later. And we're going out head full. And sure enough, midway through the fueling, sir, torpedo starboard side, all ahead full, drops the anchor over the side, cuts the line, bumps forward, and saves that ship and all of its crew, who sent him birthday cards for the rest of their lives. So, that was just a man who knew that there's a place for rules and there's a place not for rules. Now,
Combat.
fast forward about a year later, he is in a major battle with the Japanese fleets where the USS Wasp is fatally torpedoed and is burning as the sun begins to set, and his destroyer and other destroyers are flying around picking up the sailors that are abandoning ship. And he brought over 300 survivors of the ship on board, one of whom was the engineering officer from the USS Wasp. And he made his way up to the bridge and said, "Commander, my engineering plan is totally untouched. All the fires and the hole in that aircraft carrier are forward. If you'll put me and my crew back on that ship, we'll steam her home to backwards. We'll put her in reverse. We'll steam her home to Pearl Harbor, put the fire out, and save that aircraft carrier." He immediately got on the phone, called the powers that be, and said, "Sir, let me not sink her, please." Is that her? No, that's
Yeah, let's see.
that it is.
This is
That's the
Navy
Wasp.
Wasp. Yep, right there.
And he said, don't make me do this." And 3 times he requested not to do it, and 3 times he was ordered to sink her. And he says, it's one of the saddest things he ever had to do. He launched the torpedoes that sank the USS Wasp. And as small a world as you and I all know it is, when I fast forwarded 30 some years to open my first clinic as a civilian doctor in North Carolina, I had an older gentleman walk in my brand new civilian clinic wearing a Wasp hat. And guess what? He was on the Wasp when it sunk, and my grandfather had pulled him out of the water. I went, "What?"
Wow.
Yeah, wow.
Did he know the
Small world.
correlation between you two until then?
No. I saw the hat and I asked him.
Yeah.
I said, "You weren't by any chance on her when she sank?" Where he goes, "Oh yeah." Well, if you were, sir, you probably know the name of the ship that pulled you out of the water." "Of course I do. It was USS Lansdowne." And he goes, "Well, commanding officer of that ship was my granddad. Welcome to my practice."
Oh,
Yeah, that was a great moment for both of us.
yeah. And the Nimitz, you said that your dad was at the Naval Academy, or in that, right? And with Nimitz, right?
So no, granddad was with Nimitz and Halsey and that whole gang. And he was, the reason he got the honor after commanding 2 destroyers in the Pacific of coming back and to Admiral King during his in between the 2 plays. He was a lieutenant commander and then made commander, who was later a 5-star admiral. So he was, very well exposed to people in senior leadership positions. My dad was class of 43 and an aviator, and a lot of people don't know this, but the Naval Academy and West Point classes of 43 and 44 were all graduated a year early. They didn't get any summer breaks. They did a 4-year course in 3 and were graduated early to go to war. And my dad went to sea on a destroyer, and which got torpedoed, and he was the only surviving officer on it. Had to bring her home, and later on became an aviator and spent the rest of his 36 years in the Navy as a naval aviator. So it's, dad was Naval Academy, granddad Naval Academy, and, fun. Well, I'll tell you what, I'll give this connection here, because my grandfather, this leads to that Civil War book we're going to talk about. My grandfather and his wife were son and daughter of West Point graduates from the class of 1898, the first class to beat Navy in a football game, and they were very proud of that. And so it's fascinating, because those 2 1898 men, and you have a picture of one of the fathers of my great-grandfathers. One of them wrote letters to his wife all during the Civil War, which are published in this 625-page book, a literal translation of all of his letters home when he was a corporal in General Grant's headquarters. So this is my great-great-granddad, who had the son who went to West Point at 1898 and became friends with my now other great-great-grandfather, who was with the 14th New York Infantry, an officer who lost his foot in the Battle of Wilderness, and fought in the Battle of Gettysburg. And his commissioning certificates are hanging on my wall upstairs, signed by Abraham Lincoln for gallant services at Gettysburg. And,
Yeah, how about
thanks
that?
for living through these wars, guys, because your children went to West Point who had kids became my grandparents. Kind of
Holy
neat.
cow. Your family. Oh, wow.
Are you tracking on all this, Rad? There's a lot going on.
Yeah,
there.
I realized that all of the sperm have fixed bayonets
Yeah, exactly.
in his family.
Forward, yes. And there's still more. We were talking, Bob, about another family member. I believe was your uncle. That you and your uncle played a role in getting equal hazard pay for officers and enlisted.
Very
Oh,
cool.
yeah. Thank you for bringing that up. And I think I
Yeah,
sent you a picture if you've got it.
Yes, it's a smaller. If you could shoot that up there, Mark, it's a smaller image.
Yeah, the
Nope.
smaller one. That's great. There you go. So this is
Thank you.
my grandfather's son, who became a rear admiral himself, and granddad retired as a 3-star chief of naval personnel. This guy's first job as a 2-star. Now this was vice chief of naval personnel. So, and the fun part about it, he's Admiral Smedberg the 4th. My granddad was Admiral Smedberg the 3rd. The West Pointer I told you about was later General Smedberg the 2nd, and the Civil War guy who lost his foot in Gettysburg in the wilderness was Smedberg the 1st. So bing, 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 5 generations of Smedbergs, all military. But this guy, just the nicest guy you'd ever want to know. He was a shipboard guy, and as soon as he gets his job, I was a new lieutenant in charge of a platoon of SEALs on the West Coast, and I get a call from the quarterback. Sir, there's an admiral on the phone for you on the quarterdeck. Okay, so I go running out. But hey, Bob, it's Uncle Bill.
Yeah.
Bill, what's going on? Well, I just got this great new job, and I thought I'd call and ask you, what do you want me to do while I'm the Deputy Chief of Naval Personnel? I'm looking for input from the field. Really? And it didn't take me long to think about it. I went, oh, okay, I got something. You know, I am an officer, and I'm drawing $150 a month hazardous duty pay. My enlisted men are drawing $75 enlisted, hazardous duty pay for taking the same risks I are. And I said, but let me be more clear about it. When I'm out there blowing things up, I'm back in the bunker with the detonation device. My chief petty officer's out there putting this blasting cap in the C4. Okay? He's actually taking a little bigger risk than I am, and he's getting half the pay. You need to fix that. He goes, Bob, that's a great. I'm going to do it. I'm going to make that my mission while I'm here. 2 years later, when his tour there ended, he calls me again, and he goes, Bob, I failed you. I didn't get it done. And I went, Uncle Bill, I really appreciate it. A, you asked me, and B, you tried, and C, you even thought to call me and say, I'm sorry I didn't get it done. But people that have been in the military, Rad, you know this, the budget cycle in the military, guy, it's a 5-year budget cycle. And if you want to change something in a military budget system, it's going to take 5 years to do it. So 3 years after my apology call, the equal pay for an officer enlisted across all the services was approved.
Yeah,
So
that's really a good thing.
I claim partial credit for what my uncle did. I like that.
That's a great claim to fame there.
Nepotism at its finest, right? I mean, if it's going to be used, right, it's used for all. Okay.
Yeah, let's
100%.
use it for the right reasons. Yep.
Yeah, because you're right. That guy's crawling out ahead of you to plant the cap into, and face it.
Yeah.
That's really cool that you thought about that. And that's cool that your uncle thought to talk to you about it from the guys in the field.
Here.
Yeah, and it's great that the military fixed it. Okay, you've written 3 books so far. I'm sure you probably have more in you, but let's see: 6 Days of the Impossible, Navy SEAL Hell Week, number 1, Swords and Saints: A Doctor's Journey, number 2, and number 3, My Dear Sarah, Civil War Letters, 1861 to 1865. There we go.
There you go. So there's the 6 Days of Impossible, and there's the Swords and Saints, both as guys said are soon to be available on the new SOFREP bookstore, but are also available immediately on Amazon.com at my website, swordsandseals.com. This book is kind of fun because I had to write it. just like the first book about SEAL Hell Week. This is not about being a SEAL. This is about the 11 out of 70 men in my SEAL class that graduated, because nobody had written a book about what Hell Week really was. And 30 years after the fact, we would get together and not know why the 11 out of 70 of us made it. So I figured, you know what? If there's a common theme now as a doctor dealing with stress in people's lives on a daily basis, I should be able to find it. And so I spent 3.5 years writing this particular book, going, there's got to be a connection. There's got to be a reason, because we look at each other and go, not one of us are big and muscular. Not one of us are meaner than the next guy. You know, all of us are capable of doing what SEALs need to do, but why us? And the answer came in my investigations, that when I drilled down on what each of us had in common, and by the way, I called our Medal of Honor instructor, Mike Thornton, to ask him if my conclusion was correct, and he went, absolutely so. What I found was that all of the men, and this is true across all the special operations services, all of the men that go through our personal individual challenges that we give people in special operations training had all made that choice for two reasons. One was to prove to themselves that they could do it because life had told them maybe they couldn't. And two was to prove to the rest of the world they were okay because life in its many ways had told them they weren't. And so every single one of us, looking back, had been beaten up by life before we went to SEAL training. And that's what gave us the power to march on when people that had options walked away. Because we didn't, we all were like, And there's a sidebar to that, in that when I wrote the book, I have a chapter in there that I really, really didn't want to write, because I was going to admit what I felt was a weakness that I didn't want people to know about me. And that is Hell Week, those 6 days, which is no sleep, soaking wet, freezing cold, shivering uncontrollably, pushing your physical and mental limits, takes everybody to this line that you have to step over. And that's that line that's impossible. And your brain tells you you're there. But once you step over it, it disappears. And what the SEALs have learned from the very beginning, going back to World War II, when the Scouts and Raiders invented Hell Week, was that once you go past that line, people don't fail anymore. They just don't fail physically or mentally. And I didn't get that. I didn't get to that point. And I wrote it in there. I said, I really feel ashamed, and I'm gonna go out and say it in public, that when Hell Week was over, I went, oh, thank God. I didn't want to go one more second. But if they'd asked me to, I could have. And it really bothered me that I didn't find my physical limits. When I wrote that, two of my classmates called me up and said, Bob, me either. What do you mean me either? And we drilled down on that, and we figured out that we had already been pushed so far by life that if the SEAL teams tried to take us there, it would have been illegal. They didn't make us. They didn't need to take us to that point. And there's a lot of people out there like that. I see Rad shaking his head. You know what I'm talking about?
I'm just listening. My dad was adopted and went through SF training. And I think that, somebody loved him and gave him, in boot camp, more attention than not having a regular father in his life for a long time, even though he was adopted in almost a teenager, an older boy,
right.
So, he had to grow up his whole life. Yeah.
One of my classmates was adopted because he was dropped in a basket on a older couple's front doorstep, who were 70s and didn't want him, but they raised him, and he was a hockey player and a fighter, and realized he was going to have to pick a life for himself or go to jail, and he decided to go play Navy. And that young life, having to basically fight for your very self-worth and existence, made all the difference.
Finding a whole family all of a sudden, there you are, you're just like, hey, and you're talking to your buddy like, oh, me too. It's like you're just brothers that are just a family that's able to just take that next step and keep going.
Right. Sometimes closer than family. Yeah, I see that in the soft community too, that
Yeah.
a lot of operators have something to prove either to themselves or to someone else that they're good enough that they can do it. Say, hey, look what I did. If somebody comes from a quote unquote like normal middle class family where they had everything handed to them, and they're probably going to ring that bell at some point because it's just too hard and not worth it. And they've, you know,
Crusader. What we got here is a crusader, right? Isn't that Platoon with Charlie Sheen? Oh, what? You chose this Vietnam? What we got here's a crusader.
so you never got to the line. So gee, okay, let's see what's, I'm not going to say tougher than SEALs because that's going to put me in a bad pot.
It's within the SEALs, you know, they get those extra tabs and badges like scuba, like in the Green Berets, you know, like my dad was always like, oh, I just need to get a scuba qual, you know, that's all I want. An extra little scuba. There's someone else that has it. And then there's someone who has something else on top of that, you know, scuba qual with a dagger, you know, it's like, it's just.
Yeah. In the Army, I never saw a whole lot of guys with tridents. There aren't a whole lot. And that brings me to the next thing with the Delta Force. You said you have a story, Dr. Bob, about a soldier with a broken pelvis.
Yeah, this is interesting. I've got, now we're rolling into the Navy, the Army doctor with the Navy SEAL patch on his uniform. You know, I showed up on Fort Bragg, which I asked for because it's the only place in the Army the doctors get to jump out of airplanes. Well, it's the only place that anybody gets to jump out of airplanes. And as soon as I got there, the Delta Force guys came knocking, going, about that thing on your uniform, is that real? You want to come play with us? And I turned them down the first time they came because I was a brand new doctor and I had babies to deliver and things to do and patients to see. And, I said, no, not now. Besides, I've been there, done that. Leave me alone. 2 years later, they showed up and said, how about now? And I went, well, now's not bad. I feel a little bit better about my doctor skills and might be fun to do a little quick reaction stuff. And that put me in an interesting place because and this particular chapter, I think I wrote into the last article we published with SOFREP, my commander pulled me aside and said, hey, you're my medical officer and you're the only job on my staff I can't do. So make this the best place that it can be. And I spent a lot of money making that place the best that it could be. And, there's so many stories chapter by chapter that I talk about in my doctor experience that, will stick in my memory forever. But one of them was the broken pelvis story where I'm at my clinic at 5 o'clock in the afternoon and one of my medics, comes in and tells me this story. There's a guy coming in who was free fall parachuting and which is a pretty soft landing. You can fly these wing flights in and just tap down, and he hit the ground and collapsed. The medic went up and said, what's wrong with you? He goes, well, I don't know. I felt this pop in my hip when the chute opened. And he was in his 40s. And he goes, well, let's go to the doctor. He goes, no. I got to do chute shakeout and roll my chute up. And so against my medic's advice, he goes, rides a truck back, goes into chute shakeout, turns into chute, limps across to see me. Now it's 5 o'clock in the afternoon. Things are closing. And by the way, in the medical world, that's a dangerous time to see a doctor. And he goes, Doc, I hurt in my hip. So I said, stop what you're doing. Let's take an x-ray. And I made a mistake. I took his x-ray standing up. I said, just get up here right here. Let's take a front and side view, which I did. Click, click. Pictures come up. They look fine. I lay him down to do his exam, and his exam feels like the hip is moving. And a hip has a circle in the middle, and it should not move. Because if you break your hip, you're going to break it in two places because a circle can't break in one place. So I'm going, no, I think you've done some damage here. I'm sending you to the emergency room. And he goes, oh, no, man, Doc, no, come on. It's 5 o'clock. You want to go home? Medic wants to go home. I'll come back in the morning. And the pain's not that bad. All right, fine. I know I'm probably making a mistake here, but what I'll do is I'll let my medic drive you home and my medic will pick you up and bring you back in the morning. You got it? You don't do anything but lay in your bed. He goes, okay. Because broken bones are not necessarily all that bad. But about 15, 20 minutes later, I'm putting on my jacket to leave the clinic. My cell phone rings, goes, "Doc, he's dead. I'm resuscitating him on the sidewalk outside of his house." I went, "Excuse me? Oh, crap. I know exactly what's happened here." What happens when you break the pelvis, it usually right in the front, there's a big vessel that runs across the front. It pops open your pubic symphysis, and that's an artery, and he's bleeding to death. And sure enough, he had bopped it in two places, one at the bottom hip, one at the top, and he was bleeding into his pelvis. I said, "Did you call 911 before you called me?" He goes, "Yep, I could hear the ambulance coming." I said, "You let him know what I think has happened. He's broken his pelvis in two places. He's bleeding internally. You know, do you have a heartbeat back?" He goes, "I do." And I said, so poof, off he goes to the hospital, and he lives without surgery because he filled up his pelvis, which is an enclosed space, with enough blood the size of a basketball to tamponade off the bleeding.
Okay.
He didn't have to operate. What makes the story interesting is fast forward 6 weeks, he's better. He's back out in the field doing work with the same medic. They're doing some ground demolition. And he looks at him, he goes, "You look like crap. Are you feeling okay?" And he goes, No, I'm fine. I mean, I don't have any pain in the hip anymore. I've been pooping black stools for the last 3 days, but other than that, I'm fine." And he goes, "Wait a minute. What medicine are you taking?" "Oh, I'm just taking the Motrin they gave me 3 times a day for the last 6 weeks." What? Which is, for all of you who don't know this, aspirin and Motrin will make you bleed internally if you take it more than a week at a time. And sure enough, he was bleeding internally. We rushed him to the hospital, gave him a 4-liter transfusion to get his blood level back up where it should be. And my medics had to save his life twice. And by the way, I love pointing this out to those of you that want to keep on doing what you keep on doing. After he got him better the second time, he came in and asked me to clear him for free fall parachuting. I went, "No, I don't think so." Not at 45, not after almost dying twice. You're done. And I remember he looks at me and goes, "Kind of thought you were going to say that, but I had to ask."
Yeah.
So, but ask me for one more story from this book, Guy.
We have an image of it's kind of disturbing. A guy with there we go. What's the story behind this one? Is that in the book?
Yeah, this is fun. So you got to understand, they brought me in because as a physician with previous SEAL experience, I could probably handle myself in stressful situations and probably could shoot a gun, which I could. And they really liked that about me. But it really pissed them off that I kept this license plate on the front of my car, which was, of course, the Navy SEAL on the front of my car. And I would get grief about that license plate on a regular basis. But I made friends with everybody, and I took the ribbing that came with it, but I refused to remove it. And then one day, it wasn't on my car anymore. It was gone. And about 2 weeks later, I get a ransom note from somewhere in the Middle East, I'll say, with a picture of my license plate, and not this picture, but a hand holding it, saying, and cut out of newspapers and magazines, this letter saying, "The members of this unit find this symbol to be so offensive that we have abducted it and will not return it unless the doctor disavows any affiliation with his organization and pays a ransom of I don't know how much." And it arrived in the mail, and the commanding officer, brought it to me. And he goes, "Hey, Bob, sounds like you pissed off some people." "All right, sir." And then about once a week after that, this license plate would show up in a different place. It was in Russia. It was in Iran. It was in Baghdad. It was, in Hawaii. It was in free fall training. People just loved passing this around and sending me the pictures. And this particular picture found me after I went to advanced SEER training. Survival, escape, resistance, and evasion training, everybody goes to. But there's a second level, special forces all go to. It's, jungle warfare and all that fun stuff, escape and evasion. But there's a second level that the tier 1 units get to go to, where they teach you how to resist against the bad guys that have not signed the Geneva Convention. And this particular training is not pleasant, like the other one's not pleasant, because they're allowed to essentially waterboard you, torture you, get you to learn how to say, well, you can't, in this environment, you can't say name, rank, and serial number. You have to work your way through it. So here I am blindfolded, about ready to be interrogated. And they said, hang this prisoner identification sign on your chest. Yes, sir, which I did. Click, they take the picture, take it off. I continue to go through training. When I'm all done, they send this to me. I go, okay. And I never did get that license plate back.
So that's you with Sear City School, or yeah.
What's on your hand?
I think that's a number.
Wait, yeah, I said, when did I hit the mute button? When did you lose me?
Oh, no, you everything was fine. You said everything fine. And then what I asked is, what's on your hand in that photo?
Good question. I think it's somehow my prisoner identification number.
Looks like a 39. You must have been prisoner 39.
Oh, they wrote on his hand. Oh, yeah, that does look like a 39.
You're right, 39. Good pickup.
Yeah.
I was prisoner number 5 in my first year training, and I escaped twice. And my favorite memory of my first year training was, where the hell is prisoner number 5? God damn it, he's gone again. Thank you. I escaped twice when the Navy put me through SEER training.
Oh,
but yeah,
fun.
39. That's my
Fun, good times.
Jeez, go Army.
Okay, yeah, go Army.
Oh, Bob, I think you might be muted, Bob.
Yep, you gotta.
Maybe. Let's see if we can get Bob back here.
Okay.
Oh,
I hit my
there you
own.
are.
Sorry. I said, do we have about 4 more minutes left? Can I tell one more?
Yeah,
please.
Go ahead.
So this is the My Hero story I told. I gave you a little. I'd like to tell the My Hero story because Delta was fun, and there's a whole bunch of stories that you can read about in this book. But there's another story in here about my next job, which after leaving Delta, I got invited to go to Iraq with the 82nd Airborne Division, and yeah, I'm gonna check the number of attendees here. One of the participants here goes by the name of Aaron Edgar. Oh, let's see, is he still here? Because he is. And when we get to the question and answer period, he can log on and say, yep, I was there. He's telling the truth. But in this story, when I was with the 82nd Airborne, Aaron Edgar was my medical service corps officer and did some amazing things with us when we were in Iraq. But when we first got there, I had to set up a full service emergency clinic in the middle of the desert in Habaniya, Iraq, middle of bad guy country, where bad stuff was coming in on a regular basis, mass casualties and the whole bit. And it was 2 o'clock in the morning, and I get this phone call, Doc, it's raining and we can't run the helicopters, which didn't happen very often in Iraq. So stand by for an ambulance transfer. We're sending you a patient. I said, okay, what do you got? Multiple gunshot wounds, a bad guy who tried to attack our headquarters. We shot him a bunch of times, but he didn't detonate his bomb. So we patched him up. We're sending him your way. You need to get him to surgeons. So I had to do an ambulance transfer. And God bless the United States military, who in every war we've ever fought treats our enemy combatants with the same care and compassion once the battle is over that we give our own soldiers. And so that day, my job was to save this enemy combatant's life. And sure enough, he arrives by ambulance, and he's got, entrance rooms without exits. He's got an almost fully amputated right arm with a tourniquet in place. He's got an IV in his neck and an IV in his groin, neither of which are working. And I go, I need to get IV access. This guy's, bleeding. And I've called in my pediatrician, who this story is actually about. And I said, look, you can put an IV in a baby's head. You can put an IV in this guy. Find me a hole. And he tried and he couldn't do it. And I'm going, oh, man. But I had gone through combat casualty care training where we had learned how to put IVs in places that you cut down and find. Like you needed to find a vein, cut down and find it, slide the IV in. So that's what I did. I did an ankle cut down, found the vein, slid the IV in, tied it up. Never done it before except on an animal, and went, we have IV access. Pump some fluids in, put some morphine in. The guy wakes up going, hello. Okay, stand still. We're getting you out to the next level of care. Put him in an ambulance for a 3.5, 3 hour ambulance ride to the next surgical level of care that could, do something with the amputation stuff. And the Army rules are really clear. Doctors don't go on ambulance transfers. I only had 3 at my site. And you're going to get shot at in an ambulance. You're a target and everybody knows it. So only medics go. So I put my medic and I put my doctor in there to get this guy ready for transport. This young pediatrician, brand new doctor, leans out the door and goes, "Sir, you got to let me go." I said, "Captain, no. I'm a full bird colonel now. No, you know the rules. You can't go. Sir, you got to let me go."
Yeah.
And he was so insistent. I knew he wouldn't tell me something. I know, shit, we're going to get in trouble for this, but you obviously know something I don't. You're in charge of this patient right now. You go and you get your butt back here in the morning and don't get killed in the process. And I wrote this chapter about him because that casualty made it to the next level of care and lived, by the way. Thank you to the surgeons that received him. But he comes back and sees me and I put him back to work. And I never really got a whole story about what happened until I wrote this chapter about what an amazing thing that he had done, took that risk to take care of that patient. Because the only thing he told me was, sir, the reason I insisted that you let me go was because this 18-year-old medic was so scared he couldn't figure out how to draw up 5 milligrams of morphine from a 10 milligram vial. And I knew he was going to die en route. And I needed that to be on my conscience and not his.
Mhm.
And I went, wow, you risked your life to protect that young medic.
Man.
And he
Mhm.
goes, well, what I didn't know, and he told me later on, was he goes to the convoy commander. They're all lined up. The ambulance got, gun shooters in front and gun shooters in back, and they're ready to go for a 3-hour ride back. And he goes to the convoy commander. And he goes, this guy's not going to make it 3 hours. But it's now 3 o'clock in the morning. It's still raining. And if we go 45 miles an hour, 55, 65 miles an hour through bad guy country, I'll be there in 45 minutes. This guy will live. I'd like authorization to take him right through the middle of bad guy country. And convoy commander had to go to the battalion commander. And he said, yeah, Doc says it's the way to go. It's the way to go. Take that chance, save that man. And they rode right through bad guy country at fast as those vehicles would go, and that guy lived because he thought of it and took that chance. And I didn't know about it until later. Well, Colonel Craig Dobson retired last year as a colonel in the United States Army Medical Corps as a pediatrician, is out there in private practice now, and will live in my memory as one of my many heroes.
That is a great story, and I think more Americans need to hear that when they say, "Oh yeah, we're terrible and we're just doing horrible things to these people," and the lengths that some of us went to save the bad guys after the battle was over. Those stories need to be told.
Here.
That's something.
Yes.
Okay. Your most recent book, My Dear Sarah, The Civil War Letters. This is fascinating too. It's as if the World War II stuff isn't enough. It goes back to I believe it was
I know.
your great grandfather wrote
Yeah.
200 letters to your great grandmother during the conflict.
Great grandfather.
Okay.
He's the first Smedberg. I'm sorry, that's not true. He's the great grandfather at the first Smedberg level. 2 grandfathers fighting the Civil War. There you go. That's Smedberg #1.
Look at that mustache.
I love
Regulations.
Yeah, he lost his foot in the Battle of Wilderness, fought in the Battle of Gettysburg, made it after the war to California, where he became the head of the California National Guard. And it was his son that, by the name of Smedberg, that became my ancestor to the female side of the world, which my mom, my grandmother, my great grandmother. But the book is about his peer, who you can see a picture, if I bring it real close, on the back of the book here. That old man in the chair is standing next to his son who went to West Point. And that man is Barden, the last name of Barden. And he was a corporal in General Grant's headquarters who tried to get demoted to private because he really hated the responsibility that came with being a corporal. He tells this in his book in Letters Home to his wife. He goes, I tried to get demoted and they won't let me, because he could write legibly and he knew how to spell and he knew how to write, and they needed him writing
What a
all the
skill.
orders and to all the commands, which interestingly made him privy to all the troop movements, all the battles, all the ships. And in these letters that I inherited from my mom when she died, I discovered that my mother had laboriously transcribed half of those 235 letters that were handwritten in beautiful script to his wife, Sarah, saying, hey, dear, they're shooting at us, and here we are at Fort Sumter, and here we are at the battle of, they weren't called Battle of then, but he would write these stories home, and I read them, and I go, my gosh, I've got to finish what my mom started, and so I transcribed the next 100 and some letters, and it was just a brilliant look at the history of the Civil War from a soldier's perspective. He talks about the food and the deserters and watching them getting hung for desertion when they're found, and the music of that day and the horrible food and the disease, and he really brings home real how many soldiers died of disease in his own command, more so than died in combat. Is true of almost every war until
Dysentery.
World War I, because World War I was the first time we actually tried an antibiotic called sulfur powder, which we sprinkled on people's wounds, and hey, it worked. But it's it's just an absolutely brilliant piece of history. It's very difficult to read. For anybody that wants to read this book, you'll see that every letter is dated when he wrote it, because he dated it to his wife and where he was, and his wife, when she received it, dated when she received it. So you can see it was sent on this day, received on this day, and it's a beautiful timeline. But my mom had deliberately written in every misspelled word, every missed punctuation, the way he wrote the letters. So, and over the course of the years, you see him spelling better, punctuating better, because he's got commanders going, dude, learn how to spell. So and what makes it a fun a book that I can honestly recommend to Civil War buffs is that when I was reading his letters, I'd go, oh, where is he? What is this battle?
Right.
And it was taking forever to figure that out. And I stumbled across actually Sean Spoontz, who is an editor for you guys. Sean Spoontz said, hey, I found this book called The Entire Civil War History of the 7th Connecticut Infantry, which was my great-grandfather's unit. I went, what? And so what I did, I found this book. Actually, Sean found it and sent it to me. And I take excerpts from the actual history of his unit, and I put it in at every place there's a major event, and you can read about what was actually happened from a historical standpoint, then his letters. And then next battle, here's why, here's the general in charge, then his letters. It's a very, very impressive piece of history that I commend to anybody that wants to read about the Civil War.
Very, very cool. It sounds kind of like a Ken Burns story of the Civil War, where they would narrate the letters.
It's on my list to get Ken to make a movie out of this.
I was just going to say TV PBS series, My Dearest Sarah, as I move along the trenches in North Carolina. I mean.
Yeah, I can hear it in my head. Yeah.
I see it. Yeah, no, I love it. I love it, Dr. Bob. I love all of your lineage, and I bet there's just so much more. Someone had to immigrate over here, right? Originally, for grandfather to be in the Civil War. Were they also military lineage, like in your ancestral? You've had to have done some DNA on that real quick, if you don't mind.
No, I did. I was told from my Smedberg side of the world that we go all the way back to Mary Queen of Scots, and that's our Scot heritage.
Wow.
She was the Queen of England, and
Yes.
and her name was Stuart. And my mother's, all of my sister, my mother, and my grandmother were named Stuart. They were named Claudia Stuart, and it was named after that Stuart ancestry that goes back to the Scottish and English heritage. But for people that do ancestry studies, Scotland, England, Wales, Ireland. There was a whole lot of intermarriage, even at the royal level, going on there. And the Smedberg name actually comes from Scotland. I'm sorry, Sweden. There's a town in Sweden called Smedberg, and when I traced that back, it went back to King Gustav of Sweden, who was the king of Sweden. So the Swedish relatives and the English relatives all got together and conquered various parts of England, Wales, and Ireland, and those families mixed up into my DNA. So I very proudly ran out and bought myself a Stuart kilt, which I have and wear, to various Scottish events. But then last year sent off for my DNA to discover that I'm Irish. Holy shit.
Imagine that.
Well,
potatoes.
So actually, turns out I'm 47% Irish and only 15% Scottish, and then English, a little bit of Iceland, but the Norse, Swedish, Norway, Iceland, genes are solidly in there, so I can claim some Viking heritage.
I don't see you on my 23 DNA list, but it doesn't mean it's not picked up just yet, because I'm the same background, except my great ancestor was the German that came over to England to become the king when they were doing the Protestant versus Catholic. Like, we'll never, ever have another non-Catholic person on the throne. So they went back and they looked through all the DNA to say, well, who can we get? And they went and got, I guess, my great ancestor from Germany to come over, the 6'6" dude. Yeah, during that whole time. Yeah, it's crazy. And they all intermingle because they all sell their children to other families and mix those families to keep the royal bloodlines pure.
Yeah, and I haven't talked about my Adams clan at all, because I think part of that is where the Irish blood comes from. Pretty sure they were Irish potato farmers that came over during the potato famine, like most of Americans with Irish connections came from. When I'd ask my dad about it, he'd always say, "Oh, we're a bunch of pirates." That's it. That's all I got.
bunch of pirates.
Enough said.
So Dr. Bob, where can we get these books? Where can we get these signed? All of our viewers out there.
My overall website is swordsandseals.com. And there you go. Go to swordsandseals.com and you can pick any one of those books, and at the bottom it'll give you the ordering opportunity to order directly from me. They're all available on Amazon, and the first two books, which are really fun, are available on audiobooks. So Amazon audiobooks, order it from Amazon. I can't autograph an audiobook, but if you want an autograph 6 Days of Impossible or an autographed Swords and Saints, go down there like he's doing and pick, buy it now, and it'll send me an email, and there's an email option. Feel free to do it. Hey, by the way, if we got a minute, click on. I think, Mark, if you're there, click on, if that's a live link, see if you can click on that video on the upper right hand corner of that page. Yeah, right there. See if you can click on that and make that go active. Because I did this all by myself. I'm very proud of it, not being an IT kind of guy. Make it come up. You can't hear the music, but it's got a marvelous bit of music going on in the background. That's my Survivors of Hell Week class. That's Mike Thornton, the Medal of Honor winner. There we are, Hell Week, going over Rock Portage.
Wow, that's cool. This is
our
cool.
Graduated class picture at the bell.
That's so cool. And you can see that on the website at swordsandseals.com.
Yeah, check it out.
Yeah, do that.
Swordsandseals.com. Yeah.
You also see Dr. Bob wearing like a maroon beret, right? Is that what we're seeing there with a maroon flash? Is that right?
There you go. That's Colonel Bob. There you go.
Yeah, Colonel.
Airborne in my background.
What's the maroon flash? Is that the 82nd?
Where do you see the maroon? That is, I got to think about this. I think that is SOCOM, Special Operations Command.
Look at you.
That was our administrative upline command.
Oh, yeah. You remind me of my dad. Good job.
They used to have what they call the raspberry beret.
Yeah.
At Bragg. I was there around that same time. That looks like Drop Zone Sicily, that huge area in the middle of.
Yes, that's the parade
Right.
field. You're right. And it was a fun time on Fort Bragg, and I got really lucky because the Army kept trying to move me, and I kept saying, "Well, where else can I jump out of airplanes?" They go, "Oh man, quit throwing that flag at us," and because there isn't any place. And they said, "But we want you to go anyway because now you've made colonel. You got to go take command somewhere else and get ready to be a general." I said, "Well, I don't want to be a general, not under any circumstances. Leave me here." And the trick that worked is moving from Fort Bragg to another command on Fort Bragg allowed me to consider it PCS moves, even though we didn't physically move, and it tricked the system into leaving me there. So I only wanted to stay there, because I like jumping out of airplanes, and I could free fall parachute with all my boys, which is a much softer landing. Still jumping out of airplanes at 50 years old, and my kids could go through high school and finish up, so it worked out.
That's perfect.
Right, Bragg is huge. I remember being on a bus. We were going up to some training area, and this was 1987. I was a cadet, and we passed. I thought it was a mirage. There's this area. It looks like a Club Med in the middle of nowhere, but there's triple strand concertina out of it, and there's like nice cars in the parking lot. I'm asking, what the hell is this in the middle of no place? Oh, that's the Delta Force compound. Oh,
to which we can neither confirm nor deny the existence
cannot
of.
Confirm or deny the existence or location of.
Correct.
But interesting things. Well,
And
thank you so
I'm just
much.
wondering if we're really out of time, but if there was a way for the audience to ask a question, I am almost certain that Aaron Anderson would pop in and ask a question.
There is, and we can go on. We can go longer.
Yeah, I got time, Dr. Bob. Yeah, I got about 5. I do have a 83rd birthday party to go to tonight at Olive Garden. Okay, if Olive Garden wants to sponsor us, please, Olive Garden, hit us up. Okay, we would totally love to have all we can eat breadsticks and have a party there. But yeah, so please, yeah, I got 10 more minutes and then I got to go to Olive Garden.
So,
Yeah,
Sarah,
Dr.
out there, you got audio?
I think so. Dr. Bob, could you describe the Iraqi Medical Specialty Forum, kind of touching on winning the hearts and minds and civil affairs, dealing with host nation people, how complicated and rewarding that was?
That is a great question, and I'm going to try to do it in 1 minute, but I'll tell Red and Guy that if you want to have another talk sometime, we could do a whole hour on what this young captain has just proposed. Because one of the stories in this book that he was a big part of is early in the war, 2003, 2004, we were invited to spend $250,000 of the USAID's money to bring 700 doctors from all around Iraq into Baghdad and teach them what had changed in medicine in the previous 25 years. And the short story is 32 doctors got flown in right in the middle of a war into Baghdad. And, amazing. We had bomb threats that were real, but we still pulled it off. And we changed the face of medicine in Iraq in 4 days of a conference. And the reason that story is worth telling, and I'm sure Aaron wanted me to emphasize this point, is that the doctors that came to Baghdad in the middle of a war came to us crying and hugging and thanking us for their newfound freedoms and blessing America, which they still do to this day. The news never reported that. But they were given the opportunity to vote. They were given the opportunity to leave the country again, because doctors were banned from leaving the country because they didn't come back. They were allowed to learn medicine again. The internet opened up. The world came to Iraq, and I've never been more moved by a grateful nation of people than the ones we met in those 4 days during something called the Iraqi Medical Specialty Forum, of which, Aaron, God bless you, you were a major part of.
Sounds like they wanted to glean the knowledge. Thanks for coming over and helping to free them. And they want to stay in their country to preserve their culture and bring that medicine from the West, or, you know, even from their own culture too, that we figured out, you know. I mean, that's really cool when you have people that just want to stay and fix it.
Yep. And you know, you picked up on a point that I didn't make, but it's brilliant insight on your part. Why didn't they just leave as soon as they could? And they stayed for that very reason. And they made $100 a month as a doctor for 13 years after medical school until they could do their residency and then start working on their own. And I asked them, why do you do it? And they said, just what you said, Rad, for my people. That's why I'm here.
That's why.
The country.
And yeah, I would do it same here if that was the case. You know?
Yeah.
I mean, you know, you want to rebuild your streets, you want to rebuild your potholes, you want to bring your normalcy back to that area, your life, your culture. So why just try to leave it? That's, yeah, whole other hour of conversation, Dr. Bob.
We'll bring Aaron back and we'll tell that story sometime.
Yes, sir. You are a welcome
We'll have
guest.
to do that. Yes.
Great question,
Well,
Aaron. And thank you, young captain, as the elder colonel suggested.
I will
He's one of
definitely
my
have to
other
get these.
heroes.
We'll definitely have to get these books. Swordsandseals.com, and again at our SOFREP book
SOFREP,
club,
yeah.
which I'd like to remind everybody, you can sign up for that right now. 70% off offer, 39 or 35, excuse me, 99 for an entire year now. So if you would just join today and get in on the ground floor, 70%
You know, and
discount.
there's also, you know, to piggyback on Guy, it's book-club. So if you go to sofrep.com /book-club, you know, if you're into it and you want to see the Dr. Bob's books, you want to see Brandon Webb's books, you want to see all the different, you know, book club options, they're there. There's just a library for you to choose from. And you know, there's also a merch store, you know, that keeps all the lights on for us to do these shows, have Dr. Bob on, and be able to dedicate time to this, so that if you want to represent a shirt or a coffee mug, we've got them in SOFREP's merch store. So go check out that merch store.
Yeah, a lot of cool stuff. Here's you get
A lot
a
of
cap
tactical
like
gear.
my
Yeah.
SOFREP cap. There's tactical stuff.
Magpul,
survival gear.
Surefire, you know, it's all there on SOFREP at the sofrep.com. And those of you that are probably listening and going to listen, just want to say thanks again for your ear. I appreciate it. Excuse me.
Yes, thank you all very, very much for your time, and thank you, Dr. Bob, for your time. It's been a fascinating hour.
Been an honor, sir. Thank you.
Always
Okay.
a pleasure.
And good night to all.
And to all a good night.
And to all a good night. Out here.
All right. Perfect. Thanks, Dr. Bob.
Thank
Have a
you.
good evening.
Oh no, you're muted.
Oh, you're muted.
All
Yeah,
right.
you're muted.
Sorry, I'm muted. I said it was easy for me because I didn't have to remember anything, you know? It's tell those same old stories again. My wife said, I'm not going to log on. I've heard all those stories.
I already know all that stuff.
Ah,
My wife just
Fast-
gets debriefed. I just tell her what happens from the calls.
yay. So some point in time, Guy and or Mark or whoever's going to do it, you know, reach out to me so I can give you some links for the books to put onto the bookstore site, since we've advertised now.
Yeah, sure.
All right, we can do that. So Mark, this becomes a YouTube video, right?
Yeah.
Okay, so-
Anton will work on this, and we will upload this on YouTube and on the
Thanks,
site
Mark.
too. Yeah.
Complete
No,
with all
thanks,
the
Mark,
links
really.
Yeah,
to
send me
buy
the
this
links
book.
so I
Yeah,
can put them
thank
out
you.
on social media.
Yeah, sure. Yeah, we'll do.
Okay. Hey, I'm going to pounce out and go to Olive Garden. 83rd
All right.
birthday.
All right, eat some
All right,
breakfast.
peace out,
get
guys.
salad.
All right.
All right.
Yeah.
Bye-bye.
Bye. Bye.
Thank you very much, Bob. Good night.